Hi, welcome to Jeremy's Tech Channel, and today we're going to be going through my Linux migration checklist, part 2. So today, this is part 2 of a two-part series of Linux migration checklist. And in part 1, we went through how to do a hardware inventory and a software inventory. You've gone through those things and you're ready to start to look at distributions and see if you are ready to install Linux on your machine. Congratulations. There was a couple of assumptions in part 1 specifically about installing a distribution onto a USB drive and being able to boot into it. So we're going to walk through that just real quick to make sure you can do that. And then 2, we're going to talk about distributions generally, what you should be looking for. And then 3, a side note on virtual machines and to see if a virtual machine might be another option for you to see if something might work for you. You might feel more comfortable working in that environment. You may not have ever installed a live environment on a USB drive for an operating system. So I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. I'm not going to go through the exhaustive list here, but here's generally how you can do it. And we're going to use a tool called Balena Etcher that is cross-platform. So whether you're using Windows, Mac, or you're already on Linux, you can use it and it will work well for you. Part 1. USB thumb drive. You know, the things you lose all the time, you know, when you need it most, you can't find it. And you probably have 12 and you can't find one of them sometimes. Anyways, you need to make sure they have enough space on them. This is a 64 gigabyte one and it's been working great for me. So that's plenty of size. They're not expensive. You probably have one laying around. They're probably hanging out with the missing socks that you've been looking for as well. But you're going to put it into your computer. You know, the USB drive into the USB slot. So this is the website, etcher.balena.io. You can download it, click download, and look, they have Windows, they have Mac, they have Linux. I'm going to use an app image. So after you install this, whether you're on Windows or on Mac, this is what the interface looks like. You're going to flash from a file. So you have to download an ISO. And so since we use Linux Mint, I'm going to go to Linux Mint, their home. You see this download. And they have a couple of choices here. This is Linux Mint 21.3 Virginia. You have the Cinnamon Edition, the XFCE Edition, the Mate Edition, and the Edge ISO. And so for my machine, I will be downloading the Edge ISO. If you're uncertain, don't worry about it. Just download the basic one. This one I know has a newer kernel. My computer is not even 2 years old, so I'm assuming, and I made an assumption, and I probably could read here on the more info, and it probably will tell me, oh, look, yeah, the Linux kernel on 21.3, the regular is an older kernel, but a stable kernel. And then a more modern kernel is this one, 6.5. There are even more newer kernels out there. I choose to download this one. So you choose to do that. Don't worry about the XFCE edition or Mate edition unless you like the tools that you see and maybe the basic setup for Linux Mint, but you don't like the desktop environment where you click and everything, and you want to try something different. Well, you can try one of these. Or maybe you have an older laptop and you probably won't be going for the Edge. And so like XFCE is a pretty lightweight distribution, less on resources for your memory, your CPU, those kinds of things. So you choose your ISO, then you select your target, which is your device, not your local drive, your drive that you want to install, and then you will flash. And it might ask for a password. It's going to flash the drive. And now it's completed. You're done. You and we are going to be going through Linux Mint. It is, my opinion, a really great first test drive to see if things are going to work for you. Really, if you're a beginner, you're looking to see if it's just going to work, where you can start to get experience in it, right? And there's a lot of GUI tools, graphical user interface tools, for you to use that's there that you may not have in other places. So let's go right in, whether you chose the ISO that's the Edge ISO or the XFCE ISO or the, whatever which one you chose, doesn't matter. We'll be able to go in and kind of see the same thing. Remember, I chose the Cinnamon desktop environment Edge ISO to download. Another important piece of information, do you know how to boot in? Do you know how to boot an alternate source to be able to boot into that live environment? You may or may not. And so you will need, and every machine is different. Every manufacturer does it different. So you're just going to have to Google it. And you may want to ensure that, go ahead and ensure things like Safe Boot is off for the moment. Some distributions can work with Safe Boot, some cannot. Just for this moment, just take it off for now and just make sure everything's okay. That's one part you're going to have to do on your own because everything's different. For me, all I have to do when I turn on my computer is tap the escape key until I have a menu that allows me to choose a boot device or to go into my BIOS. Okay? And then I click it and then things start booting from the drive. Okay? So let's get into Linux Mint and let's take a look at what you can do. So here is Linux Mint booted up in a live environment on my computer. And this is a great way for you to test some things. I've already had to do a couple things to ensure that you could see this for yourself. So I went ahead and was able to connect to the Wi-Fi where I'm located. I was able to install OBS to record the screen, and I have my external NVMe drive plugged in, as you can see over here on the top left corner. There it is. I'm going to take that and use that and put this file on there and good to go. But I wanted to be able to show you what to look for, what to experience to see, is this going to work for me or not? What works and what doesn't? Obviously, for me, the first thing that popped up was Wi-Fi networks are available. So my Wi-Fi card works. It may sound silly, but guess what? My trackpad, my mouse works. Right-clicking works. Display, is it set at the right resolution? This actually picked the right resolution for my display. It's a 16 by 10 display, and it already had set 200% on the scaling so that I could actually read stuff. So that's pretty great. So my screen obviously works. It seems to be working okay. My Wi-Fi is connected. Let's check some sound settings here and make sure that my sound works. Let's test sound.
Front, left, front, right.
Cool. Okay, my sound works. That's great. Now I know that my sound works. Cool. Now let me test that network connection. And I'm pulling up Firefox. This is the first time any of this is booted up. Things may seem a little slower because you're running from the bus of the USB drive, okay? So there are some things that have to load and run through that bus, that USB bus, whether you have a USB 2.0 bus or 3.1 or 3.2 or whatever it is. All that really means for you, if you don't know what that is, how fast that bus is, how fast that information can be transferred. So don't worry too much about the speed of that. So one of the things I like to suggest with the Linux Mint being something that you use is they have a couple of nice utilities that you can use quickly that will help you. If you're new to this, that might make life a little easier. One of the big things for me is being able to make sure that my NVIDIA graphics card on my laptop can have a proprietary driver ready to go for software like DaVinci Resolve. There is an open source driver, as you can see there. It is installed, ready to go to be able to use it for most situations. That's going to work great. But they have the option to install those proprietary drivers, and you can do it right from a GUI, and that's really great. Sometimes it can be finicky to do it in other ways. It's gotten a little better over the past couple years, but that is something I would check. If you need proprietary drivers for your Wi-Fi card or for your graphics card, for instance, that is something that is very helpful. And as far as, you know, hardware, I've plugged in my external drive. I can try to connect my Bluetooth headphones through their Bluetooth devices application that essentially says, hey, should Bluetooth start automatically? So now I've set my Bluetooth headphones into pairing mode, search, and look, there they are, Sony WH-1000 XM5s, and that's pretty great. So now I know my headphones work. Okay, my headphones work. My external drive. I don't have a printer here with me in Vietnam, so I can't test a printer. So once you've kind of gotten, okay, my keyboard, does my keyboard work? Oh, well, that's kind of important. So Jeremy, are you telling me you're worried that your keyboard won't work? There's an extremely high probability that your keyboard will work. But this is a great way to make sure that your keyboard works. When I did this a long time ago, there was a couple of devices that the keyboard wasn't registered right, and so I had to make a couple of adjustments, and one time the keyboard just straight up didn't work. So hey, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Hi, this works. Great. Boom. Done. I'm not going to save that. The other thing you need to be aware of when you're in a live environment, when you're done with it, when it's done, and when you shut down, that's it. It does not save what you did on that drive. It doesn't save it. It's as if you start fresh all over again. So don't expect to be able to save something on here and then boot this up the next time, or when I run Linux, I want to do that. Now you can set the drive to be persistence, but it does take a little bit of work, and that's not what this video is about today. So the last part of your walkthrough here is to see if maybe this distribution is for you. The beauty of what I just mentioned is if you do mess something up, it's okay. You can start over. You can reboot, boot back into this thing, and now you can start over and learn something new. So, you know, right click, left click, menus, you know, software. There's a backup tool. I like this. I like the way this interacts. Maybe you don't like the way this looks or the way this interacts. Maybe this doesn't make sense to you. You're clicking around, you're unable to find what you're looking for. Well, maybe this distribution isn't for you, and that's okay. Because at this point, you aren't necessarily in a place to just install a brand new desktop environment, which, by the way, in Linux, if you don't like a desktop environment on the Linux distribution you got, you can change it. You might want to know what kernel you are going to be using. And why that matters is if everything worked and your kernel is, you know, like this kernel is 6.5.0 or -14 generic, right? That kernel matters because you know everything that drives that hardware is going to work at least with that basic 6.5 kernel. Okay, so you went through, you used Linux Mint, that was fun or that was frustrating or whatever you went through, right? And there's some things you need to evaluate. Was my hardware recognized? No. There was one thing, my Wi-Fi card wasn't recognized or my Bluetooth stuff wasn't recognized. So I need to figure out what to do. Well, Google is your friend. See if there's some easy workaround, something you feel comfortable with. If you don't see a solution that makes you comfortable, we can try a couple other distributions. And I will make some suggestions there to see if things work. And if not, maybe this is not the time or space unless you feel like, hey, I want to learn this. This is important to me. Great, no problem. But that's kind of where we are. But if it went through, you saw all your hardware, you like some things, and maybe you're like, hey, this Linux Mint thing is great. Let me just do it. Let me caution you and try a couple different desktop environments and distributions. So use that same USB drive and flash it with that USB flash tool. I would choose Linux Mint, I would choose Pop! OS, and I would choose Fedora. I would start with those 3. There are some others that some people might suggest you choose. Go ahead and try those too. What's it going to hurt for you to spend the time, download the file, put it on the USB drive, and see what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like, all of that. I would go through and make sure that I do at least those 3. It should give you a good basis. They have different kernel versions, different desktop environments, and you should feel pretty good about that. We know my hardware works, my software is going to work, and I like this certain one. Do I go ahead and click? It's up to you. I would give yourself a little bit of time. Maybe boot in a couple more times on the live environment. You're like, but I just want to get going. And if that's you, go ahead. Enjoy it. That's kind of how I was. And I put myself in some binds, but go ahead and do that if that's your thing. For a lot of people, your computer, you have these things that you need to be able to do when you need to be able to do them, and you may not have time to fiddle around, right? I would do and make sure, play with those a couple more times. There's something called virtual machines. You can get a software called VirtualBox on Windows, on Mac. Do the same thing, but on a virtual machine. You essentially load that ISO into the virtual machine. It installs onto a virtual machine. That way you can see the install process and get a sense of how the install process works before you actually install it onto your own local machine. And you may feel good about that too. I suggest doing that. And we've gone through and made sure our hardware, our software, our distribution, we've chosen all those things, and you're still unsure, that's okay. Don't do anything. You're ready to go. That's okay. Do it. Once you get that distribution installed, let's say you chose Linux Mint in the Cinnamon desktop environment, you get going and there's a couple things you didn't realize or something that you thought or you forgot something on your checklist. Don't start just loading on everything and then start installing every piece of software and load up your system. Just take it slow as best you can and get comfortable. And 2, you will get frustrated at some point. Maybe you're a savant and it's no problem for you, but there's a good chance you'll get frustrated at some point. You've probably gotten frustrated with Mac at some point or with Windows. Take a deep breath, Google it, go on YouTube, see what's going on, see if there's some solutions. You're going to see about 20, 30 different solutions, and just keep learning, keep growing, read the manuals, read about it, get to know it. You never really did that when you were using Windows. You never really did that when you were with the Mac. But now that you're on Linux, it's something you should do. And this journey is so much fun. I love it. You may do what we call distro hopping for a while. You may go from distro to distro to distro to distro. You just save your home folder onto an external drive, change your distro, go through, and that's okay too. We all, I can't say we all, but a lot of us kind of go through a distro hopping phase and do that. And then you've got the veterans who are like, the distribution doesn't matter to me. I can work within any distribution and any environment, whether it's just a terminal or this desktop environment or this window manager. And that's awesome too, right? It doesn't matter, but you need to feel really good and comfortable so that you can set yourself up for success. And that's what we went through today. We went through and made sure that your hardware works. We made sure that your software works. We made sure that you could boot into a live environment on your computer and check all those things. And then we made sure that you chose some good distributions for you to try and see if it's for you. There's some problems that you're probably going to come up with. If you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you may have problems with installing proprietary drivers. Pop! OS is a really great option for that because they already bake that proprietary driver in. They have one of their ISOs and it says, NVIDIA. Choose that one. That easy. You may have issues with your camera, or you may have issues with your Wi-Fi connection. Maybe you start wanting to tweak your desktop environment. You love tinkering. You realize you love tinkering and you break your system. You're like, oh no, I can't see. I can't see what to do. It's okay. Keep working through it. Back up your information. You have things like TimeShift. You have other backup solutions in Linux that you can use. Take advantage of those and don't worry about it. And once you feel super comfortable, then you're at home and you can work and you can play and you can have fun. There's things that you can do. You can do gaming. You can, watch media. You can set up as a media entertainment tool. There's Linux all over the place. But I just wanted to give you some opportunities. We went through and made sure everything was working before you installed, instead of wondering if it would work. We also gave ourselves plenty of time to make sure that we really want to do this. And then when we're ready, we're going to feel good and confident that things are going to work out for us. Thanks for joining me today. Let's do this Linux thing, and I'll see you tomorrow.